workers in a plant might do. So I didn't see unions and labor in the same way that plants did. But I was there along those times and wishing that there was a better balance of power, you know. People in America don't understand that the only balance that the worker has of power is unions, and there's, I always say, well, yeah, they've got this much power and corporations have this much power. So it's not a fair fight, and it's getting less and less so, especially when you're fighting minimum wage and things of this nature. We got to remember that all these people that worked in plants or unions or whatever jobs, and then other jobs got paid because they got paid, and all that money was what? Spent in the community. So it was for the good of the community. Maybe the big boys didn't make multi-millions, but everybody got along pretty well. And that's not the way it is anymore. We're hurting in Clinton. We've gone from 35,000 down to about 27,000. We lost a lot of our intelligentsia that have moved away to other places. You know, people wonder, well, why don't we have as good a football team, basketball teams as we used to have? Well, they all moved away. We're fortunate to have what we have. And then, yet, we look to places like Pleasant Valley and Bettendorf, where many of the management of these companies live. We're just playing catch up here, like with building code. Somebody comes to town making several $100,000 a year and wants to build a $1,000, maybe $1 million house. No building code? What? I'm going to Bettendorf. I live in Bettendorf, commute. Now that's changing. We have a building code, and we're kind of catching up with the world. But Clinton is hurting, and you know, there's better times ahead, I think, because of, we still have the transportation. We're still right in the mecca of the center of the country with all the transportation and water. And Clinton Corner, I always call it, but ADM isn't going to leave because that water is so valuable, and they don't have it in the Southwest. So, as you know, there's drought, but we have our water, and hopefully always will. What else?
You mentioned the country club was directly affected after the strike. What other local entities were directly impacted by the after effects of the strike?
Well, we have been a company town, but with several big companies, as I mentioned, industries, and then businesses. Well, that's shrunk. Now, today, we have ADM. DuPont is just a skeleton. What's the name? Bemis.
Clysar?
Yeah, Clysar, Bemis, and Equistar. Equistar has always been kind of a hands-off industry. You don't see them trying to manipulate the town the way ADM has. And then, of course, the casino and the big box stores, and that money, a lot of that money goes out of town. So how does the average person notices most of all, I think, in restaurants. We used to have maybe 20 restaurants you could pick and choose, and now you're down to about 3. You know, when my wife and I go out, we have to, where are we going now? That's 1, 2, 3. You know, go to Denver, they're on every corner, they're busy, you get a waiting period, you know. Here you don't wait, you walk in, there you are. A lot of the money goes out of town. And it's hard for the average person to see all that. They don't see the slave labor of the low-paying box store who get their goods from a foreign country, slave labor. It's kind of a spiral downward. But some of us get along. Actually, it's a good place to live if you do have an income, because it's cheap to live in Clinton, Iowa. So So many of us have stayed, and our school systems have been pretty good. We've built new schools, and that attracts people to town. As I said, Clinton has a lot of things to be hopeful about for the future. It seems like we just get hoping about some things and then take a step backwards. Ashford leaves, and what are we going to do with that now? That's a big loss to the community.
And is Iowa a right-to-work state?
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't
Right to work for less.
How, yeah. How do you think that the strike directly influenced the course that legislature would take?
No, they took that long before, and so we were still fighting to have unions, even after, fairly successfully, even after the right to work came into being. And it'll be interesting to see nationally if that ever changes. As I said, the balance, you got to have unions for the balance of power, but they've got to be sharper than they are. There's a lot of things I don't like about unions. For example, I wanted to have a candidates night at a local establishment, and one of the union guys said, "We can't go there. He's anti-union." I said, "Well, that's kind of why we are in the boat we're in. You know, it's retribution and revenge and small thinking, both ways." So I don't like that about unions either, but I didn't have to put up with that too much in a professional union like teachers. So, anything else?
What role do you think the media played in the strike? Like the newspaper and stuff like that?
Acquiesced. They're a Republican newspaper, and they broke a union of their own typists, prints. They started a lot of businesses that way. Some of their printers went out and started printing companies and done quite well. So the entrepreneurial system has worked in that way. But
Was there ever any national media that came, like public media or anything like that?
to cover this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure, but I don't know that I followed it that much. You know, Des Moines Register was here. It was those kind of union things were happening all over the country, so the national press and magazines had their pick of the litter to go check out. And Clinton Foods and ADM may not have been the best players in the corporate world, but they sure were far from the worst. And they can make a case for having done quite well for Clinton. And I'm glad they were here. I'm glad they're still here. I just want them controlled, and I don't want them to have more power than is necessary. Other questions?
Gary, I can step in here briefly and just ask you a question. You know, you're working in the schools during both, 75, 79, 80. What were the effects of these kind of big dramatic strikes on the schools, on, the teachers, on the kids? Is there anything you noticed?
I thought, of course I was in the middle of it, I would say minimal. It's just part of life. My dad works at Clinton Foods. They're going to go on strike. My uncle lost his job. My cousin got a job down there because he crossed the line, this kind of thing going on. I didn't see a lot of acrimony among students, teachers, citizens, more so on citizens. But still, we got through it fairly peacefully, and maybe that's not a good thing. We just kind of, that's the way it is. Well, we'd always been a company town. Around Clinton, you will hear people idolize the rich. that goes back to our lumber days. The rich were so fabulously rich. They were like billionaires, and everybody else was like peons, serfs. But they didn't feel bad about it. Everybody was poor except the rich. And the rich lived on your street too. They had a mansion, and there were common houses, and everybody could afford a house, so they were getting along. And then the rich people like the Youngs and the Lambs would do things for the community. They were very community minded. They were on the city council, mayors. They brought vaudeville acts to town like Lillian Russell. They do about anything they could for the community. They really shared their millions, and they have right down to this very day. But they were visible. Now today, the wealthy in town, we don't know about. As I said, I don't know a single ADM management person. And I know a guy at the bank that's a millionaire, and he's earned it and he's not rich, he's just a millionaire, that's all. And he's earned it. And then we have our newest millionaire, David Johnson, football player, top-notch guy that deserves it. And, you know, being a liberal Democrat, people think, well, you're just jealous of the wealthy. No. We all want to be wealthy. That's fine. I am very much against the intergenerational uber rich that don't share their money tax-wise. But they're not Clinton. I suppose there's money going out of Clinton to them, but basically we're within the realm of acceptability here.
So you said that you don't really know many ADM, or you don't know any ADM executives, but back time of the strike, Clinton Court executives, were they involved in the community at all?
Oh yeah, Ronald Jurgensen was seen all over town. I don't know that Ben Dixon, he was seen around town. I don't know how involved he was, but many of them were involved, and it emanated from, like, you start out at the country club, and then pretty soon you're on the community chest drive or a building fund or something like that, and they were very active. I don't see those kind of active people around so much anymore. There are a few, and they stand out. You know, like the Kiwanis is doing the Eagle Point, and they have a leader who's an industrial guy from Fulton, and he's a good leader. I just wrote a couple columns about leadership, and we have some, and we have some poor leaders that come along every once in a while. But we're kind of treading water and waiting for a better day.
You mentioned earlier about Bob Coons. How was he viewed during the time of the strike?
Well, probably one of the most hated people in town. But he was still a good guy. I knew him at Chemblex, and I knew him from Clinton Foods, and I knew him from around town in various ways. And most people didn't like him because he was, you know, he was the face of the bad guys. But I felt bad for him in that situation. And when you knew him personally, you knew he was a good guy. But you know, I remember he and his wife saying, "I don't know why you're a Democrat." And I said, "Well, I know why you're a Republican." It's sad that people can just say to themselves, "Well, you know what? We're doing this for business, and the hell with all the people." And that's short-sighted, because the people can really hurt you or help you. Maybe we'll come around to that again, figure that out. Other thoughts?
Gary, you had mentioned something about kind of the militancy, or radicalization, I guess, of the situation. One of the events that people had mentioned in previous interviews was when Angela Davis, who was running for the Communist Party on the Communist Party presidential ticket, visited St. Mark's Church in Comanche.
Yeah, I wanted to go, but I didn't feel like I could go.
Okay. Well, can you talk a little bit more about that? I guess what you saw as far as you know, from the community, the reaction to that type of thing, and maybe how perception shifted over time in the community.
Well, I don't know that it has. Still, you're held by the mores of the community to a certain standard, even though you'd like to step out of that. It wouldn't have hurt me as a, you know, social democrat to have seen a communist like Angela Davis, and there's a lot she would say that would be acceptable. You know, kind of like Michael Moore up there in Flint, and he was on TV last night having at him. And thank God we have some people like that around. But you dare not listen to them if you're from Clinton, or you're one of them. You know, you can't. I ran into this a lot as an administrator. You were supposed to live by certain standards. Make decisions quick. You know, don't wait 2 hours. You got to be able to make a decision, and you can't do this, and you got to do that, and that's leads to bad leadership, and so your whole community and the fear in industry, the fear of your fellow citizens keeps you in line, and you dare not step outside that line. You see what happens when somebody's a little bit of a militant in unions or something. Well, then they're known as a troublemaker. So it's hard to do that. It's hard to have a counter idea in a community like Clinton too. I remember we had a educational thrust come to town called outcome-based education, and basically it was good. A lot of the educational improvements are good, but of course everybody says, "Oh, we don't want any of that new math, and they don't teach phonics anymore, and that outcome-based education, you know, anything new is wrong in their mind." And then if you, on the other side of the street, let's say the administration wants to bring in outcome-based education, you say, well, you know, in Chicago or somewhere where they had this problem, they said, what, you don't like outcome-based education? I didn't say that. I'm trying to give you a mixed view here, but people don't want mixed views. Case in point, we had a music teacher here that was known to have a little booze on their breath, or maybe they were drinking during the day. Well, the conservatives want to say, "You're fired." Well, then you're in court. Well, you want to support everybody. How are we ever going to get rid of anybody? You know, you do it by a process. You bring them in. You say, well, there's indications that you've been drinking, and we want to give you some help, and then you go through the help, and they don't help, and then eventually you can get rid of them if you use a process. But the anti-union type people, the conservatives, want to be able to get rid of people now. Walk in and say, "You're done. You're out of here." And that's what happens when they don't have unions and so on. Then they start firing people that go to court. They're mad about that. And then the public will say to me as a principal, "Well, what's the matter? You can't fire any teachers." I said, "Well, I've gotten rid of many teachers. You won't know about it, though. It won't be in the headlines of the newspaper." 3 cases in point that somebody comes in and says, "Well, we've been evaluating you, and you know I haven't been happy with your performance, and John, it's time, I think it's time for you to go." Well, I'm not going, and I'm going to go to the union, and I'm not going to put up with this, and I'm going to fight you. 2 weeks later, they come and say, "Here's my resignation." Because they know it's true. And they know you're going to be on them. And evaluation is a very tough thing. And if you do it right, you can do anything. If you do it wrong, you're in trouble. Other questions?
What made the 1979 strike different from strikes that had happened before that, or was it different from strikes that have happened before that?
Well, we didn't have many strikes